Bossier. Let me see your hand so I can see where you are. Great. If you're a guest with us today, would you lift your hand so we can see where you are? Wonderful. Guest, would you just keep your hands up? An usher wants to give you a guest card. And if you would take that card and fill it out, drop it in the offering plate, that would help us get to know you better. We're just grateful that you've chosen to be a part of this service today, and we welcome you to First Baptist Bossier. We're in love with guests, and we want to sing a song and just make you feel real welcome this morning. So let's all of us now stand again across the building. And guests, we want you to know at First Baptist Bossier that you're special and you're loved. Our people are greeting one of the auditorium. Let me again welcome those of you who watch by television. You're watching the exciting worship service, the First Baptist Church in Bossier City, Louisiana. Today we have a special pulpit guest, Ondie Brum. Ondie committed over 200 armed robberies. God has miraculously saved him, delivered him from drugs and a life of crime. He is a trophy of God's grace. I want you to hear Ondie Brum preach this morning. God bless you and your family is our prayer.
Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel his mighty power and his grace. I can hear the brush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place.
I want to introduce Ondie Brum this morning. I met Ondie Brum over in Tennessee when he and I were speaking on a conference together. We had met earlier in Glorietta, but I didn't remember that time. Ondie spoke and touched my heart and my life, his testimony. And I just grew to love him immediately. And I said to him then, I want my people to hear you. I want you to come to our church. So we've looked forward to this day, and I'm not going to tell you a lot about him because I've asked him to give his testimony, and you'll find out a lot about him as he gives his testimony. He's just getting over surgery, and will be speaking to us in some pain, but you pray for him, and God will use him as he did in the early service. We had a wonderful early service, and you're in for a real treat. Just get ready because God's going to speak to your heart. And I just pray that all that God wants to do, he'll do in this service. He'll have the freedom to do as we allow him that freedom. So Judy's going to come and sing one of the most beautiful songs, one of my favorite songs. And then Ondie Brum is going to come and speak to us out of his heart. Let's welcome Ondie Brum to First Baptist Bossier. God bless you, brother.
And didn't have to die. He chose to die because of his love for us. All my trophies and crowns, my robe stained with sin, 'twas all that I had to lay at his feet, unworthy to eat from the table of life, till his love made provisions for you and me. And I will glory in the cross, let his suffering all be in vain. And I will weep no more for the cross my Jesus bore, and I will glory. Oh, I will glory. Yes, I will glory in the
Thank you, Judy. And it's a beautiful song, you know. I think, Dr. Lowery, I was cut out to be a singer, but I got sewed up wrong. I mean, you know, I can't carry a tune. I'm a very legitimate prison singer. You know, I mean, I always have been behind a few bars and never have found the right key. But I try. I mean, I really, you know, I just tear up the song, getting it out of my heart. I don't know why. I want you to take your copy of Scripture, please. Open it up to Psalm number 6. Psalm 6. I want to say a few words of introduction. You see my cane, and I've got this body brace on it. It goes all the way around, and I've been in a year of struggle. We were diagnosed in December with cancer, and then we had an artificial prosthesis put in, and we've had 2 failures and 3 major surgeries. And I want you to know I need you this morning to help me to preach. I really need you to help me to share my heart. And, you know, I told a little story this morning about a young man who was being interviewed for the very first time to be a preacher for a church. Now, he got a little older, and another church came to interview him, and they walked in, and he preached 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Lee, I mean, no, I tell you, that was wonderful. They loved it. Let's get that guy. 15-minute sermons. They brought him home. The very first Sunday, Dr. Lowery, he preached 30 minutes. They said, that's fine. We like that. That's all right. The next Sunday, he got up in the pulpit, and he preached 3 hours and 52 minutes. Now, they said, we've got to have a talk with our little pastor. So the deacons got him over to the side, and he said, now, what in the world's going on with you, you know? I mean, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 3 hours, and 52, what's the deal? He said, well, the very first time you came to hear me, I had been to the dentist and had all my teeth extracted. And so I was bumping my gums together for all I was worth, and 15 minutes is all I could handle. And then the second time I preached when I was here, 30 minutes is my regular sermon. And I always preach about 30 minutes. But, you know, my dentures were doing real well and everything, and I got them in there, and that 30-minute sermon came out. But this last day, the 3 hour and 52-minute sermon, I got my wife's dentures in by mistake. About half of you were smiling, the other half was looking at me real hard. Psalm number 6, verse 2. Have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am weak. O Lord, heal me, For my bones are vexed. My soul is also so vexed. But thou, O Lord, how long? I don't know if you've ever had this happen to you, but I've been asking God, how long? How long this brace? How many more surgeries? I want you to turn now to Psalm 51. Psalm 51. You know, the common denominator we all have in this room is that we go through life and there's pain. There's physical pain, there's emotional pain, and there's spiritual pain. In verse 8 it says, make me to hear joy and gladness, that the bones which thou hast broken may rejoice. In the midst of this year, I believe that God has done more in my life in terms of ministry than in any other year, even though I would not have chosen to go through the experiences this year. Now, if you turn to our last passage, it's going to be the 100th Psalm. Psalm 100. You see, I believe that joy and thanksgiving is a choice. I chose today to accept that which God has given and to rejoice and be glad in him. Psalm 100 says, make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that has made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name. My question this morning is, are you thankful? We have given one day of the year. We find it in November. We call that day Thanksgiving Day. But I believe that the Christian experience allows us to have thankful hearts every day. And I have a suggestion for a holiday. I want to call it the Nagger's Holiday. It's the day where you get up and you nag, complain, gripe from sun up to sundown, and when the sun sets, that's the last time you complain the rest of the year. A Nagger's Holiday. A boss looked at his secretary and said, did you wake up grumpy this morning? She said, no, I let him sleep in. And this wife led this husband to this particular question and gave him lots of options, but they were all leading. She said, honey, do you love me for my natural beauty, my ability to cook meals so well, or my tremendous personality? He looked at her a while. He said, I'm thankful for your vivid imagination. But are you thankful this morning, in spite of the circumstances? You see, Thanksgiving, I believe, is a spirit, and we've made it a spurt. Thanksgiving is not because of the circumstances, but in spite of the circumstances. Be thankful unto him and bless his name. It is first and foremost the command of God that we be thankful. You say, Ondie, how in the world can I be thankful? I can't pay my bills. Be thankful you're not one of your creditors. I do not understand this, but Thanksgiving changes the circumstances. Somehow with Job, I see him being thankful and God turned his captivity. I see Old Testament prophets time and time again coming to a point of brokenness and thanksgiving in their heart, and God changes it. Now, I do not understand it and cannot explain it to you, but I understand that a black cow eats green grass, gives white milk and yellow butter, and it happens every day. But I don't understand it. But the reality is that God, through The cubicle of the experience called pain brings you into ministry that has depth. Some of you know what I'm talking about. That constant companion called pain. My little mother was Ukrainian born, and your dear pastor is going to go to Kiev. He'll be about 50 kilometers from where she was raised. During World War II, the German soldiers, when they came into her little community, took all the young ladies, put them on a train in a boxcar, and sent them back to Germany, and she wound up finally in Austria. And there she was slave labor in the commandant's home. After the war was over, Mama tried to go home, but she couldn't. And during an incident where a group of soldiers got very intoxicated, they came to that little house where Mama was working. They wound their fingers in that jet black Russian hair and pulled her out of that home, down the steps and into the barn. One of the men took an axe handle about 3 foot long and started to crush my mother's legs so she couldn't run. After they had made sure that she could not get away, each one of those men took their turn at my mom. They did the most vile and perverse thing that man can do to a woman. And we did not know that. She did not know that, nor did they. But God was going to do something with that worst moment in my mother's life. You see, she didn't know, but during that time, the seeds of life were planted. And she'd have a little boy. That little boy would grow up never knowing what it's like to have the arms of his mother around him. I am the product of a horrible, cruel rape. And I want you to understand that it has taken me a long time to get to the point where I can be this transparent with you. You see, when I first started to share my testimony, it's been several years now, I was asked by Dr. Harry Pylan to come to Glorietta, where I met your pastor. I gave a very small, protracted version of what happened to me and the prison and the drugs and my mom. After the service was over, a man waited till everyone else was gone, came up and took a hold of my hand. And he said in anger, "What do you got to do to get on the program here? You got to be a pig and roll in the mud? You're a convict. You're a drug abuser. If I understand you correctly, you're the product of a rape." Tears were falling off my chin by now. He threw my hand back at me so fast that it struck me on the face. He couldn't hurt me any more physically than he did emotionally that day. He walked about halfway down the aisle, turned around and looked back at me, pointed his finger, and he said, "You will never be the man of God that I am." He walked out. I don't know how many tears I shed in the next 6 months hearing his voice ringing in my ear. I had a little Ford Fairlane station wagon. I got into it, and I put my belongings into a little duffel bag, headed back to Baytown. I believe that the sovereignty of God brought your pastor and me together in Glorietta so that I might hear him say that when I was created, God made me for a reason. And the genius of God exploded whenever he made you. And you have fingerprints and a voice no one else has. And you've got abilities and talents and gifts that are unique unto you, and God will use you. There are no unwanted children in the family of faith. Those words haunted me. And after about 6 months, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I rolled out of the bed and onto my knees, and I said, whatever you want, Lord. Dr. Lowery's words were like a sledgehammer. And God kept beating at my door. You see, I was afraid of rejection. I was terrified to speak in public. I have dyslexia, so it's hard for me to read. So when God started dealing with me, I was a very stubborn candidate. I remember what it was like as a little boy coming home. Arnie Hillock and Mikey Klein would get up on the front porch and Mama would come out, their mothers. Put the arms around him, tell him how much they loved him. Then I would go home. And my mother wouldn't be there. Or if she was there, she would find a way to get away from me. By the time I was 5, I had decided that I was a second-rate human being. That I was hopeless. Now, if your mom doesn't love you, who can? Before I go any further, I want you to know something. I really love my mother with all my heart. And she's not a bad lady. She's been hurt. But by the time I was into my early teens, I was already having problems with drug and alcohol abuse, and I'd been charged in a couple felonies. At age 14, I started to use a drug called heroin. See, when I'd put that needle in my arm and inject that fluid for a few hours, anyway, I would escape from my reality. But peace is not in a pill. And happiness is not at the bottom of any bourbon. I got so addicted to this drug that it forced me into a lifestyle of armed robbery. And I was convicted for almost 200 robberies. I didn't find out about my conception until my mother had a breakdown when my brother died in Vietnam. We buried him, and shortly after that I went out with her, drove her out to the cemetery, and she was standing there at the foot of his grave, and suddenly she started digging in the dirt as if to try and get to him. I said, Mom, you got to stop. Please stop. Mama, stop. But she wouldn't. So I reached out and I took her by her arms and I shook her. And suddenly she snapped back to the day that I was conceived. And I became the perpetrator in her mind. And I was wearing the reality of what had happened to my mother as she spewed it out on me, I knew it was bad, but I never thought it would be that bad, and something broke inside of me that day. When the judge looked at me, he said, "You know, Ondie, you are the most hopeless individual I have ever had in my courtroom. I'm going to sentence you to 10 years in the prison of southern Michigan. We call it Jacktown. It's a penitentiary that has the largest population of any in the United States. My behavior was so bad, my constant confrontation with others ultimately took me to a place called Marquette, Michigan. This is where they take the incorrigibles, the ones that the guards don't want to deal with, the ones that the prisoners are afraid of. I remember in the 50s, a group of men had taken the governor of the state of Michigan hostage, and they took those 3 men up to Marquette and welded them into the cell. Can you imagine sitting inside a cell and they're welding the door shut? At a place called the Hole. It's a room 3 foot wide, 6 foot long, 8 foot high, black cinder blocks, solid metal door. They took me down there. They stripped me of my clothes. They threw me in that hole for 9 days. I want you to know every bit of humanity was crushed out of me, and I was a creature and not a creation when I came out of there. I got paroled, and my parole officer sent me to a rehabilitation center. It was there that I met my wife. Susie was there at this rehabilitation center because she's a Michigan School for the Blind graduate. Margaret and Wesley Broussard, who are members of this church, have helped my Susie so much. They were always there because she can't drive. And I love you, Margaret, and thank you for taking care of her when I was gone. But as good as my wife was, she couldn't change my life. And I have 2 teenage boys who had to pick their daddy up off the front porch in their school bus, would sit there and watch as a kindergartner and a 2nd grader would try and carry me in the house. Those 12 years that Susie was with me, the first 12 were hell on earth for her. We tried everything. We tried the methadone programs. We tried rehabilitation centers. We tried everything that man says can correct you. But I want you to know the prison systems of America cannot change character. It takes divine intervention. You hear me? It takes someone who knows God to go to someone who does not know God and help that person find peace. I'm trying this morning through all of this to do one thing. I want you to understand that you are important and that you can make a difference. And around you in Bossier, there are people who need your love. Susie left me, took the boys, came home. I'd been on a spree, crying. I remember I walked into one particular store about 2:30 at night, and the young lady behind the counter, when she turned around, she was looking down the bore of a .44 Magnum pistol, and this drug addict on the other end said, "Open the cash drawer." She had a light in her eyes that I'd never seen before. She said, "God loves you. God's got a plan for your life." I looked at my gun. I looked at her. I said, "Do you see this?" She said, "Yes." I pounded it on. "It's real. It's not a chocolate gun. Give me the money." She said, "Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have, I give to you." I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, I must have come in the wrong store." And I put my gun up and tried to leave. I got to the door and she said, "I'm not through with you, young man. Come back here." I couldn't believe it. I turned around and walked back in. She got in her purse and she opened up a little wallet. She reached in it and she gave me this tattered little tract. It's all I've got from my past life. It's all I want. It says, "Smile, Jesus loves you." When I came to Christ, it was August the 17th, 1983. There was a hurricane in the bay. They named it Alicia. The night that I was saved, that hurricane came on shore and devastated Baytown, made it look like a war zone. Margaret and Wesley lost their house in that. But the storm that had raged in this old convict's heart was over, because I'd walked down an aisle and I'd taken a pastor by the hand. And he led me to Jesus. Not long after that, I was struggling with God, and he wanted to, and I don't understand it to this day, to use me in a special way. And I told him all the reasons why I couldn't do it. You know, sometimes we can really get stubborn. And I listed all my reasons, and he said, "That's all right." He said, "You just get up from where you are, walk down, and tell the pastor that you are surrendering to the ministry." So I did it. I said, "I don't know what I'm doing down here. I'm just, He said, "Well, glad you came. We were wondering how long it was going to take." Everybody in the church seemed to know, but me. I went home that night, and I had to make a phone call. I had to call my mom. Her voice, to this day, such power over me. I dialed her number, and I heard her say hello. I said, "Mama, don't say anything, please. Just listen." I said, "Mom, something wonderful's happened to me. Your son is different. I want you to come to Houston, Texas. I need you, Mama. I want you to come and stand with me when they license me to the ministry." She said, "Ondie, you don't understand. You were born alone. You have lived your life alone. And when you die, you will die alone." Those words cut into me like a knife. I said, "Mama, I'm not alone anymore. I've got a friend that sticks closer than a brother, and he's promised never to leave me, never to forsake me." Then I heard the phone as she put it down, and it went dead. God had about 2 weeks between my phone call and my licensing service to deal with my mom. The Friday prior to that Sunday service, I got a phone call from a lady who lived down the street from us. She said, "I don't know what's going on with your mother, but I put her on a plane today. This is the time she's going to arrive in Houston. Here's the flight number." I was so grateful. I went out and I thought, maybe there'll be something different in our relationship. As she came down the tarmac and walked towards me, I ran towards her and put my arms around her. She pushed me away. The scar on her forehead where they'd crushed in her cranium was there, and the scars on her legs were the reminder of who I really was. We got in the car, and she wasn't sure whether she'd stay or not. She thought about getting back on the plane. I just begged and pleaded for all I was worth, got her bags and hurried her into the car, and I was driving down the interstate headed home. When we got to San Jacinto Mall, I thought, gee, I've never given my mother a gift. Never bought her anything. So I got off the interstate and took that exit. And I bought my mother a beautiful green silk dress. Shoes that matched. Some earrings. The next day we spent some time together, and then Sunday came. And I was on the platform here, and she was sitting out in the audience. And I remember I looked out there, and Mama was crying. Tears were falling on that pretty green dress. I'd never seen Mama cry before, other than Pete's funeral. Something was happening to her. And that night I was going to preach my very first sermon. Well, I'd worked on it. I think it was 11 and a half minutes, and I preached from Genesis to Revelation twice. You know, it's kind of tough. I wanted her to be there when I preached that sermon, but she said no, it'd just be too hard on her, and so we videotaped it, and the next day we went to a friend's house, and we put the cassette in, and she watched all 11 and a half minutes of it, and she said, I need to talk to you. I want you to come outside. So I walked outside, and I was behind her, and I just had my head down, and I said, oh God, won't you let her one time put her arms around me? You know, doesn't a boy deserve to hear I love you from his mother? I was 36 at the time. But I got scared, and I said, no, it's not going to happen. I might as well not pray about this. But by the time I looked up, her arms were already around my shoulders. And I fell on her like a little baby. And I cried. And she said, Ondie, I'm sorry. It hadn't been easy for me. I said, Mama, it's okay. You don't have to tell me anything. She said, I want you to know that I really wish things would have been different. I said, Mom, they are different. I said, I'm different, and I want you to be different. And I tried to tell her about Jesus. I want you to pray for my mom. Her name is Barbara. I could tell you her Russian name, Vada Kolodichna, but I don't think you remember. And if she gets saved, see, she'll have the capacity to forgive. And she needs to forgive so she can forget, so she can live today. Some of you are in that catch-22 situation. You haven't forgiven. You can't forget. Bitterness is there. Some of you just need to come to Christ and really surrender your life. Some of you who know him have gotten cold and indifferent. And you can walk right by that lost person, that Ondie Brum, and it doesn't bother you that they're headed for a Christless grave and an eternal hell. But I'm up here today as a reflection of what God can do. And nobody is hopeless. Nobody. I know because of the cross that I'm deeply loved. Judy sang about it. I know because when I look at the cross, I've been accepted. And I belong. And I'm a child of the King. I've been delivered from the hell. I have everlasting life. I have a friend in Jesus. I'm not afraid anymore. I can say I love you, and what's more, I can let you love me without any fear. And that's one of the greatest gifts of salvation. God is dealing with people in this room in many ways. And I want you to know, I pray that many of you will receive the Lord and the freedom that I have known these last 8 years. Because who the Son sets free is free indeed. You know, I want the church to be all that God wants it to be. You don't want anybody to know if you've got a wayward child? Is that more important than praying for them? That they might come to know Christ? There should be hundreds of you here praying. There's others here who need to come and make other decisions public. I want you to come. Heads are bowed, choir singing. You come, intercede for that friend, that family member, that person at work, at school. You come.
Perhaps today you're in the need of spiritual help or prayer. We invite you to call the 24-hour prayer line at First Baptist Bossier. Perhaps you feel like you need to respond to Ondie's challenge. If you need spiritual help, call the prayer line at 742-PRAY. For more information on how you can receive an audio cassette tape of Ondie Brum's testimony, write to The First Word, P.O. Box 6120, Bossier City, Louisiana 71171. Be sure to include today's tape number with your request. Tape number 522A for Ondie Brum's personal testimony.